Hey there, baseball fans. Nathan Rohde here with Shooter Hunt, bringing you the latest episode of Coffee and Curveballs. Today's topic is the 2018 Super 60. We were all just in Chicago for our annual meetings. At the end of that, we have the premier event to kick off the high school season with the Super 60, where we run a bunch of top draft prospects through an indoor workout. Hitters, they run the 60, take BP, do defense. Pitchers throw like a 20-pitch bullpen. We had about 150 scouts there. And there was good reason for them to be there, Shooter, because looking at the roster, this is the 16th year that we've done the event. This might be the best roster we've had yet.
Well, I can promise you it was the best roster I've ever seen at Super 60.
It's the only roster you've seen so far.
and blown away by the talent there. Somebody was asking me, who's good that was there? I said, every single kid. Who's going to get drafted? Well, everyone, if they want to get drafted and don't sign themselves out, are going to get drafted. It was impressive all the way around, but just seeing 200 scouts in this small area, the game sped up on me a little bit because my head was on a swivel. There was so much stuff going on. It was incredible. Had so much fun at the Super 60.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in and process in a very truncated amount of time. My phone gets blown up every year afterwards. Who'd you like? Hey, how is my guy for the scouts that didn't make it? How is this guy from my area? And I'm like, can I have like 24 hours to digest everything? So it was a lot of fun.
The mid showcase, they're asking like, who do you like? Let's take a timeout. I'll get to you on Wednesday. Give me Wednesday or Thursday.
Exactly. So I at least wanted to get through the Super Bowl. Kind of watch that, relax, and decompress for a minute. But to talk Super 60 today, we're going to bring in David Seifert, our director of college scouting. Obviously a tremendous background in scouting, having been a cross-checker, an area scout with the Phillies, as a college coach in the past as well. David, thanks for joining us today. You've been to the Super 60 before as a scout, but it's your first time, as a member of the PBR staff. What was your overall take, real quick, from this year's event?
I was blown away by just the body types, the size of the athletes that are there now. I think this was my 9th or 10th one, but obviously first as with PBR and D1 baseball. But yeah, just the size of the athletes and just the tools that they were showing, from arm strength to run speed to bat speed. It was an amazing show by the position players.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's get into some of those position players and talk about the top hitters to really start off. And you can't go to an event like this, especially if he's there, you can't not talk about Jarred Kalinek. And he quite possibly had one of the best statistical performances of the Super 60 history. There's a couple other guys like Justin O'Connor and Trey Ball that have had tremendous outings at the Super 60, but Jarred Kalinek ran a 6.55 60 despite being one of the most physical dudes out there. He had an incredible couple of rounds of BP where he just mashed baseballs like he does all the time, every time we see him. But then on defense, I think the guy's got like 5 throws. 4 of them for Kalinek were either 95 or 96. So he's got plus arm strength from the outfield. Obviously just an incredible showing in the workout for him, and makes him, he's a first rounder, slam dunk, but now we're looking at him being a likely top 10 pick.
Yeah, for sure. And what separates him, a lot of guys did well with tools at the showcase, but what separates him is just his ability to play the game of baseball. He's just not some tooled out athlete running around out there with no instincts. He has instincts, he has feel, he's the total package.
Mm-hmm. He certainly is. It's awesome to watch him play, and he's always been a physical dude, but like, how much does it jump out for you with how physical he is, but also still how quick twitch and fast he is?
Yeah, his trainer, the training he's done, the people he's gotten with to improve his game, they've all done a remarkable job. It obviously has started with Jarred himself doing the work and wanting to do the work and his passion for the game, but he's had a lot of good advice along the way.
Mm-hmm. He certainly has, and he's a baseball rat. And
for sure.
Usually when I use the word grinder, or when anybody uses it, we're talking about like kind of that little guy that gets more out of his tools than he really has, or the sum is greater than the whole of the parts. But with Kalinek, like, he's a grinder. That's the style of play he has, but he's completely like tooled out. So it's a total package when it comes to him.
For sure, yeah, he does. He has a total package. He has a chance to be a superstar. I know with any high school hitter, there's risk, but I think lessens your risk. He may have, really with anyone there's risk, but I think he is so advanced tool-wise and polish-wise, ability to play the game. He's more like a college kid coming out for the draft. So he's a really interesting guy.
Certainly. It'll be fun to watch him through the spring, especially considering he's from Wisconsin. So not going to be a whole lot of outdoor opportunities for him to play, despite what Shooter tells you about the good weather in Wisconsin. So next guy we want to talk about, who I won't call it a coming out party because he's been well known. You know, he was at Tournament of Stars, he was at our Midwest Pro Case, he was at Area Code Games, but the performance that he put together kind of was like a reemergence for him. But Alex Pinella, another Wisconsin guy, came out, another big physical dude, but runs a 6'6", 560. Then he gets to the plate, and it's just a short, compact stroke. Really impacted the ball in BP. I mean, I think he really opened a lot of eyes, with what he offers, and, guys should be following him this spring.
Yeah, I can't think. You know the high school crop way better than I do, Rhodes, but I can't think of a more physical guy with his tools that's out there. I mean, he ran a 6.62. I know Kalinek ran a 6.55, close, but I mean, Pinella is 6'2", 210, bat speed. It's a compact swing. A lot of guys maybe hit the ball harder, but they have longer swings. They're going to hit the ball harder if they have length. But Pinella, to me, he's the total package. I first saw him at the Pro Case last year, the PBR Pro Case in June, I believe it was, and he blew me away. I was like, geez, this guy's really good. And then I went to Tournament Stars. He was up and down a little bit. And then area codes, he just seemed to be off his game, longer swing, just wasn't the same guy I'd seen. So, yeah, I think he did get a bit written off, but he certainly reemerged on Sunday, that's for sure.
And we talked about this a little on the podcast with Pinella. You talk about that short stroke, how balanced he is, compact, it's really simple. We saw that swing and miss at the area code games. The swing was a little longer. Kind of go back over what you mentioned on the podcast and how that's a guy that you'll bet on. He's the one that'll probably make adjustments in pro ball just because everything is so simple and mechanically.
Yeah, back to the swing, just kind of the basics of the swing. And it doesn't mean you're going to hit. It just means you have a better chance to hit maybe than the guy who doesn't do it as well. But he has balance. It's a compact swing. He's not reaching, he's not creating length, I guess. He's not off balance. It's powerful. If you close your eyes and you just listen, you can tell he's batting because it sounds like a gunshot. He's one of those guys. It just got louder when he hit. So, yeah, that's the type of guy with balance, with bat speed, with the ability to control that swing. So I know he struggled a little bit, but he's a guy I fully expect is going to hit. He has all the qualities that you look for in a hitter.
And then one more position player that we'll bring up before we move on to some pitchers is Dylan Lifrieri. He's an infielder, outfielder from New England, Connecticut specifically. 2015, he was the MVP of the Future Games. And he comes out to the Super 60 and was one of the top guys there performance-wise again. So he really has that knack for shining on the big stage. What did you see out of Lifrieri, which I imagine it might have been your first look at him?
Yeah, he was a guy that really woke me up. I mean, we start out by running the 60. He's got the good, quick feet. Ran a 6.65. It was smooth. Kind of a shorter stride, but hey, he lengthened that stride out a little bit. He's running the 6.5 easily. Now, baseball's a quicker twitch, shorter stride game, so I'm not saying he needs to lengthen out 60, his stride. But if he did, he'd be that type of runner. Then I wrote down an above average arm with plus accuracy. I look on the radar. He's thrown 93, one of the better throws of the day. But the 93 and the plus accuracy, I think Kalinek was the only other guy that combined the two to such a good extent. And then they hit. And, man, he has bat speed, loose hands. He had a lot of pre-pitch movement going on, big leg lift, maybe got a little bit out front at times, but the bat to ball, the hand-eye, it was all there. So he blew me away. He really did. I knew nothing about him coming in, and he had a great showcase for himself. I'd love to see him play in a couple games this spring just to see him against pitchers changing speeds and locations. But as far as a top 3-round guy, without a doubt.
Excellent. Well, let's move on to a few pitchers. And we can't talk pitchers without bringing up Ryan Cusick out of New England, who, he was in the top 100. He was at the area code game, so he is a known guy. But to see a Northeast arm come out in February and pitch like he did, 92, 94, up to 95, that big durable frame. I saw a good feel for a changeup. Breaking ball, wasn't quite there on this showing, but again, it's February. I'm not going to really knock a kid for not having, the sharpest of curveballs, in a February showcase. But Cusick, obviously on the mound, was a big winner on the day.
Certainly, he was up to 95, and it was a low-effort delivery. Compact arm action, low-effort delivery. He was around the zone. The breaking ball was a little rusty, as you point out, but hey, it's early February, so that's gonna come along. But very, very impressive. And this is another guy I didn't know anything about. I saw him out there throwing. I'm like, wow, he passes the eye test, and all of a sudden he's throwing 93, 94, 95, pretty easy. He wakes you up as well, makes you sit up straight and pay attention.
Mm-hmm. And my favorite guy is no secret because I've talked to him a lot before even going into the Super 60, but he didn't light up the radar gun. But Drew Rom, just with how easy it is on the mound, not to mention how relaxed he is, he's just there flipping the ball between his hand and his glove. He's like, whatever, it's another day. I don't care that there's 150 scouts here. 88-91, super loose and easy delivery. The slider didn't show the usual big wipeout break that we had, but it was still tight. It's not like it was loosening up or slipping out of his hand. It was still a really tight pitch. So it'll be easy for that, just to kind of come back to where we saw it last fall. But, what were your thoughts on seeing Rom out there on the mound?
Yeah, Rom was real impressive. Easy. He had tailing life to his fastball, 88, 91, 92. The thing that was most impressive, the biggest note I had, was just how quick his arm was out front. Got to his ear to release. It was just quick. And those guys gain velocity as well. So, yeah, he is a real good one to watch as well. And again, a guy I didn't know much about. I heard the name. I heard the kind of the buzz about him coming in, and he proved it.
Mm-hmm. And then Nick Thwaites, right-hander out of Ohio, was really impressive as well with a 3-pitch mix, pitching in the low 90s, changeup, breaking ball. Obviously, I say a big winner. There was a bunch of them on the day because it was such a good crop. But he certainly belongs in that conversation with Cusick and Rom based on the outing that he had.
He showed the best 3-pitch mix. A lot of the guys' breaking balls were maybe rusty, but he definitely had the 3 best pitches on the day. Who doesn't like a strong-bodied guy with a quick arm? I mean, that's what he was. He was a pretty mature-bodied kid, but he had a quick arm. He's got some upside there. Interesting guy.
Mm-hmm. And then the last pitcher that we'll bring up is Francois Castillo, who has a great background and story. He's a cousin of Starlin Castro, the big leaguer. He's been to a ton of PBR events, so he's certainly well known. And every time he comes, he's the infield, the outfield, and he gets on the mound. And he's always showed that arm strength, but only recently has he really focused on pitching, which it seems like his future might lie there now. He gets on the mound, low 90s, and it's not surprising to see a guy with that arm strength to get on there and throw low 90s, but what stood out for me was the ability to spin the breaking ball. It's like the story completely changes on him now.
Certainly did. I mean, he got it right out there. I was sitting right next to you. He got out there, high energy guy, just going after it, 90, 92, 93, and we're sitting there, wow, this is a good arm, strong-bodied kid with a quick arm again, and all of a sudden he drops that 12-6 hammer on us, and you and I just looked at each other like, he's got that too. It was an impressive day for him, and I just loved the energy. I loved how every time, I think his first 5 or 6 pitches, he looked back on the big board to see his velocity. He was into it, and he put on a show for us. He's a fun.
I'll certainly be interested to talk about him with Shooter later because he's a curveball snob. I want to know if he actually thinks that can qualify as a hammer. It is in my book, and if you say it as well, that's good enough for me. But
he had the side view, so maybe he didn't get quite our look. So maybe we can help him out.
There we go. So moving on from the pitchers, normally at the Super 60, guys just kind of do one thing. They're either a pitcher or they're a position player, even though a lot of guys do have two-way ability or they do it in high school just because they're the best athletes on the team. But we always have like a couple guys that do that two-way workout because the ability is there, the potential for them to be drafted on each side. So let's talk about a couple of those guys. First off, Matteo Gill. Everything he did on the day, whether it was BP, fielding, or getting on the mound, was just super smooth and easy.
Yeah, from his he ran with a little bit of effort, but he had loose hands in the box, great hands in the field, quick release. Really impressed me as a position player. I hadn't seen him for 2 years. I saw him 2 summers ago, but I didn't see him this past summer anywhere. And to see him again as a position player was great. And then all of a sudden he steps on the mound, and he's 90-92 with a breaking ball. And I don't want to say I liked him better because he's a darn good middle infielder, but he was really good on the bump. He didn't look like a position player pitching. He looked like a pitcher pitching, and that's the really thing that struck me. 90-92 around the zone with a breaking ball, good delivery, loose arm. Yeah, he blew me away as a pitcher because I didn't know he could do that. I had no idea he was also a pitcher, and all of a sudden he's up there. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Certainly, and he's also got those big league bloodlines. His father is Benji Gill, former major leaguer, so lots to like about Matteo Gill. But then the other guy was William English out of Michigan, who I knew, was a good athlete. I saw him on the mound one time, real quick outing, in the fall. But other than that, hadn't seen him much. But to see him come out and throw like he did from the outfield, which it was an absolute rocket launcher, to show, bat speed at the plate, but then get on the mound and do what he did. I was blown away by him and his just natural athleticism that he has.
And here's another guy, too. I knew the name. I'd never seen him play, but he gets out there and glides to a 6.66 60-yard, just gliding. I mean, his strides are, 5 yards long, just ate up the turf. It was ridiculous. And then he's throwing 95 from the outfield, and his swing needs a little development. I mean, there's going to be a lot of reps there needed to develop that swing, but it's loose. It reeks of power. I mean, so he's got a real good potential as a position player. But if not as a fallback, a guy who gets on the bump, those 88-91 with really good hand speed on his changeup, which showed me he had feel. I mean, this is a guy that has a big future, whether it's as a hitter or a fallback as a pitcher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. And so now let's look at some of the sleepers in the event. You could easily say that they were standouts, because, like we said so many times, everybody was really good. But some of these guys might be overlooked slightly, whether it's, because they're a smaller frame and they're kind of performing above their tools or whatever. Maybe there's some kind of profile stigma against them. But let's get into a couple of those guys. First two are outfielders in Kyle Hess and then Jack Herman from Pennsylvania and New Jersey, respectively. So a couple of Northeast, East Coast guys. What did you see out of them?
Hess, to me, was just a smooth athlete. Smooth run stride, just smooth and easy swing, just loose, had some lift. I think he's going to hit for power and for average. Really impressed by Hess. And then the other one you mentioned, Jack Herman, just a compact swing. Ball was just jumping off his bat, just jumping. Easy stroke. These couple good-looking hitters.
Mm-hmm. And then Matthew Hogan out of New York was a guy, that I really liked. I hadn't seen him before. Turns out an injury had really kind of kept him under the radar. He hadn't played much, but he's a big physical guy. So, I was thinking, all right, he's just going to mash, but he ran fairly well for a physical guy, and then he gets up there and it's just impacting the baseball in BP.
He was. I mean, I'll be the first man. I wasn't huge on his hitting mechanics, but I loved his bat speed. I loved his strength. I mean, those are two of the things you're looking for, especially a big guy. And what impressed me at first was he ran a 6.77. It was smooth. It was easy, lower effort. And so anytime you have a big guy doing those things, and he shows you the bat speed, that's definitely a guy too. And you're right. I think he was a sleeper because he's a guy that nobody even really had any buzz about other than maybe that region of the country, but he did really well for himself.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. So our last category here, we talk about like top position players, top pitchers, two-way players, sleepers, but now we're going to get a little bit more into the analytical side of things. At the event we had Flight Scope set up, which is a data tracking software, kind of hard, a lot of technical terms that I'm digging for to really describe, but it captures things like exit velo, spin rate, the launch angle of the bat, all kinds of things. Phil Kerber is in charge of it for us, and he had to clean up an Excel sheet before he sent it to us with all the data. And even with it cleaned up, it's got like 8,000 rows and 50 columns and all these crazy numbers. But let's get into, I guess, some of the things that really stood out in that data, starting with Jack Neely, who's a pitcher from South Texas. He gets on the mound and he stands out just as is, 6'9", pitching at like 90 to 93. But you could tell the sink on his fastball just sitting back there. But then you went and looked at the spin rate, and I mean, it just backed up what you saw.
Just a quick explanation for spin rate for our viewers out there. Spin rate is how quick the ball is turning out of the pitcher's hands. An average major league spin rate is around 2,200 RPMs. The higher, you either want to be way above the 2,200 or way below. The higher ones, the 2,700s, those are the four-seam fastballs that they look like they're rising, and the hitters swing under that pitch all day. The sinker ballers throw well below the 2,000 area, 15, 16, 1,700, and those are for sinkers, and that's exactly what Neely is. Neely's a sinker baller. He's a 6'9" right-handed pitcher with a loose arm, easy delivery, 90-93 with a 1,585 RPM on his fastball, just going underneath bats all day. He never exceeded 2,000. So Neely stood out not only for his body type, arm action, delivery, looseness, everything you're looking for in a pitcher, but he also had that magical 1,500, 1,600 spin rate for a sinker baller. It was he had a good day.
And on the hitting side, Cam McMillan was a guy, he's fairly well known. He was area codes as an underclassman, real physical dude. He's one of those ones that he just walks out, gets off the bus, and you're like, I'll take that.
Yes.
It just stands out physically. A very good athlete, lacks polish to his game, but, hopefully it's something that'll kind of come along with repetitions. But you brought up on the podcast an interesting note. He had, the top exit velocity in BP. I mean, he was hitting lasers, but they really truly were lasers, because you mentioned, I guess it was the launch angle, in the trajectory of his balls that, really stood out for him.
And again, just a quick definition for our viewers, launch angle. Home run hitters in the big leagues, their launch angles are between 25 and 35 degrees. It's basically the angle the ball's leaving the bat. McMillan's was on the really low end. He hit one ball. It was 106.3 miles per hour off his bat, which was the high of the day of anybody. It never got more than 12 foot off the ground. So his launch angle is actually just 5.7 degrees, which is amazing. The ball obviously didn't travel that far, because your greatest distance is going to travel about 27 degrees. If you hit the ball at 100 miles per hour at 27 degrees, that's depending on how much backspin and some other factors, but that's going to be about your furthest distance. But so his ball really didn't go that far, but amazing. It never got more than 12 foot off the ground, which by my definition is a laser.
And then you mentioned the launch angles, that prime kind of range. There were a couple of guys that exhibited that in Gavin Dugas, and then was it Jack Herman that also had it?
Yeah, those two had, kind of a major league home run hitter launch angle. Dugas is obviously built like the home run hitter, that strong, short, powerful build. He hit two balls. One was 102 miles per hour at 28 degrees. It went 384 feet. And then he had another one at 103 miles per hour off the bat at a launch angle of 25.5, and that went 386 feet. So he's got the swing. Love to see these guys playing games, but they put on a show in BP for us.
They certainly did. So that's a good look at all the standouts from the Super 60. Obviously, jump on PrepBaseballReport.com. Going to have a lot more analysis there. We did a podcast where we went way more in depth on a lot of guys. Talked for an hour between David, Shooter, myself, as well as Sean Duncan. So, David, thanks so much for joining us today, and we look forward to having you again on Coffee and Curveballs down the road.
Great talking with you. Thank you, Nathan.
Excellent. Now let's go back to Shooter for just a minute to wrap up here and talk about what's coming next on Coffee and Curveballs. The next episode, we've got some smaller events, not the Super 60, but still some noteworthy things going on. Shooter, you're actually headed to the Northeast Pro Case this coming weekend.
Yeah, it started as a New England pro case, but it's steadily added New Jersey, New York, PA kids. But what an amazing event! You talked about Cusick. Cusick's going to be there, but there's also a couple other big 2018 draft prospects. Michael Burrows, kid going to UConn, who's been up to 94, supposed to be a big arm. Theo McDowell, a kid that I really want to see, low 3/4 slot, West Virginia commit. But then, Rhodey, you wouldn't like this, but there's a lot of 19s and 20s there that I'm really interested to see heading into the spring. So that we're definitely going to be talking about that next week because it's a big-time event, going to be a lot of pro guys there.
Mm-hmm. And myself, I'm going to the North Carolina pro case. It's got some really interesting guys that scouts are going to want to take a look at. Not the top-name guys. They may end up becoming that. But these are more like guys that, if they make a jump in the spring, they'll be interesting prospects to follow. But they'll for sure be guys to follow as they head to college and continue to develop. So we'll definitely have highlights from those events as well as some stuff that we took in before the Super 60. We had the Florida Pro Case, so we'll have Doug Freeman on for a few minutes to talk about what he saw there. But then, Shooter, you also were in Arizona and California taking in a few preseason things.
Yeah, taking in the sun, too, during these cold months in the north. But, yeah, the action at Arizona State, which it was a gorgeous stadium. One day for that time with Jordan Banfield out in Arizona, and then in SoCal, a couple of big-time practices at Notre Dame and Harvard Westlake. So two rivals, a lot of talent. So we'll be checking those guys out next week.
Excellent. So that's coming up next on the next episode of Coffee and Curveballs. Once again, thanks for joining us again today, guys. David Seifert, thanks for coming in as a guest to talk about the Super 60. For Shooter Hunt, I'm Nathan Rohde. This is Coffee and Curveballs. And until next time, we'll see you guys at the ballpark.